welcome back to the Describe Your World podcast. This is episode 3, and today I have a very special guest with me. This is my wife, Katherine. Say hi.
Hi.
So it's interesting because we're together. For people who are listening, we're in the same room sitting right next to each other. It took us like 25 minutes or more to prepare to come on the podcast and talk to each other, which is interesting because we talk to each other all the time. This is pretty daunting. Would you say it's daunting, Katherine?
It's weird that you call me Katherine. It's nerve-wracking, for sure.
Right. So just for context, Katherine is a nurse in the ICU. Katherine is a world traveler. So she's traveled to such renowned places as Taiwan, Tanzania, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Italy. So we have a lot to talk about, and some of it's going to be pretty deep, pretty intense. But I'm excited to get into the interview and see what Katherine has to say. So we're going to start, as I start with every guest. We usually get into early life, and I like to frame it as an origin story. So I'm going to let Katherine just go wherever she wants to go with her origins and beginning and sort of what shapes her into the person she is today.
Okay. I am currently 26 years old, so I was born in 1996. I am the second and last child of my family. My sister is 7 years older than I am. I was a very unexpected surprise. My mom was 40 when she gave birth to me, so that was certainly unplanned on her part. I am not from North Carolina. I am from Michigan. That's where I'm born and raised. My parents are from Ohio, so we just moved a little further north. I'm actually the only real Michigander in the family. My parents and my sister were born in Ohio. Home life, as far as framing an origin story, is equitable to a villain's beginning. It was a lot. So like I said, I was the second child, 7 years younger than my sister. Pretty unwanted by my sister, I'll say that. She found me to be very annoying and kind of just another thing that she had to pay attention to and had to take care of. So her and I were close now, but we did not get along for the first probably 16 years of my life. It was pretty tumultuous, pretty heavy between us. We kind of did whatever we could to make the other person's life a little worse. But like I said, we're much closer now. As far as my parents, I guess maybe let me get into home life a little bit first. Grew up on a big farm. We had lots of different animals. We cultivated hay with our field and had basically a working farm. We would sell our animals, sell the products that came from the animals, sell the hay, all of that. So I grew up very early learning the value and the necessity of hard work, and what it means to put effort into something and reap the benefits of it. I was, out lifting bales of hay when I was like 4 or 5 years old, learned how to drive a tractor before I could drive a vehicle, learned how to take care of other things that I was responsible for. And I actually really loved my childhood. I loved the house that we grew up in. I loved the land that we had, the animals, and just all of the adventure that came with it. There was never a dull day growing up on a farm. Grew up with some horses, grew to love riding horses. Haven't done it in a long time, do not currently own any horses, but it's something I would like to look forward to in the future. So I guess getting back to my parents met when my mom is 7 years older than my dad. My parents met when, I want to say my dad is either in middle school or maybe early high school. My dad is best friends with my mom's brother. That's how they met. My dad and my mom's brother met in school. They're the same age. And then kind of, my dad went to my mom's house to hang out with her brother, and he ended up meeting my mom, and their relationship has been pretty rocky from the beginning. They got together and then had my sister and then separated for a while, I think about 3 years, got back together and then, packed up, moved to Michigan, consequentially had me again on very unplanned. And throughout my whole life, I can remember their relationship being very, I guess it was different behind closed doors than we presented ourselves to be. We presented ourselves to be a very well put together, very, Christian family. We went to church every week, and, we were active in the church, and we would have all these parties at our house, not parties, but, like Easter egg hunts and stuff like that for the church at our house. We presented ourselves to be really well put together and kind of a wholesome family. And then once everyone left and the doors were shut, it all fell apart pretty quickly. My parents could not get along for the life of them. They could not ever agree on anything. There was always arguments over finances or what to do with my dad's business or what to do with us as children. It was just all a lot of arguing, and that bled into my sister and I. And I think that's probably why her and I had such a difficult relationship for the, first 2/3 of our lives together. I think that's just what we grew up on, was seeing ineffective relationships. And so finally, my parents actually decided to get a divorce when I was 11. My sister was 18. It was her last year of high school. That's when they announced their divorce. And it was kind of one of those finally moments. It had been coming for so long that it was inevitable. We just didn't know when it was going to happen. And I think our parents tried to wait as long as they could for us to be kind of as grown as possible, and a little more independent on both of our ends. I mean, my sister it was her last year of high school. She was going to be a little more independent after that. When my parents decided to separate, that is when kind of life fell apart for most of us. My dad moved out. I stayed at home with my mom, and I saw my dad every other weekend. My relationship with him had been really, really strong. When I was little, I was very close with my dad, did a lot of things with him. I learned a lot from him. We would go fishing, and we would go, out on the property together and look for spearheads from the Native Americans that used to live in Michigan. It was just, him and I had a really good relationship, and then I stopped seeing him as much, and it fell apart for several reasons. I think one of them was I just didn't see him as much as I used to, distance and all. And then a lot of it came from my mom, who I have discovered into adulthood is a raging narcissist. She's severely mentally ill and has never sought any sort of treatment or help for it. She refuses to recognize the illnesses that she has. And refuses to really recognize the consequences of her actions due to her mental illness. But her behaviors and her beliefs towards my father were rooted in hatred. And she taught me to be hateful towards my father. So when I was 14, due to the things that my mom had said to me, I decided to stop seeing my father. And that lasted for about 3 years. And during that time, when I stopped seeing my father, moving forward, my mom became very abusive. She had always kind of been verbally abusive, berating us, telling us we weren't good enough, telling us she expected more of us, just, saying hurtful things that really parents shouldn't be saying to their children. Then it became mentally abusive when she would, mess with my mind a little bit and try and almost alter my reality to fit hers. She lives in a different reality than the rest of us. And she would try and present her truth to me and get me to accept it as my truth. And then she did eventually get pretty physically abusive. It started off relatively small, just like a punch, a slap, a kick, whatever, and then became more of a daily thing where I just expected the physical abuse from her and figured out, what the different footsteps meant when she walked in the door and how loudly she put her key in the door when she got home, or she would leave me a list of things to do if she went to work for the day, if it was the weekend or the summer or something. And if I didn't hit everything on that list, I knew there were going to be consequences. There were times where she locked me in my room and refused to let me out to eat, drink, go to the bathroom. It was just, she was isolating me from the rest of the world. And she did that very, very well. She used a lot of other excuses to isolate me from the world. I got kind of sick in high school. I had mono for 6 months and was honestly sicker than I should have been with it. But she used that as an excuse to pull me out of gymnastics, and she used that as an excuse to make me stay home for several weeks. And that, of course, intensified the abuse. She loved the attention that she was getting because of me, but it didn't change her behavior towards me at all. And then there was a night when I was 16 years old where I had actually reported my mom to Child Protective Services. This would have been the third time that she was reported to CPS. Her brother reported her back when my parents initially got divorced when I was 11, just because he noticed, the verbal abuse, the mental abuse. Our house wasn't very well kept together. Like, it wasn't probably the safest place for me to be living in terms of just moving around the house safely. So she was reported by her brother when I was 11. And then I honestly don't remember the second time, like who reported her or why. I think it might have been the school. But then the third time I actually went to my counselor at school and was honest about the abuse that was going on. I told her, I don't feel safe at home. This is what my mom does. I don't want to go home tonight. And so she's a mandated reporter. She reported my mom to CPS. CPS came and spoke to me at the school that day. And CPS really dropped the ball because they told my mom that I was the one who reported her, which that's not supposed to happen. Like, CPS is not supposed to reveal who, reported the person for retaliation purposes. And that's exactly what happened. My mom picked me up from gymnastics that night. It was October when I was 16. And, she drove me to a little isolated parking lot actually where she worked at the time. It was kind of not really well lit and there was nobody there. And she'd been very quiet, very reserved. And she asked me, why did I do it? And of course, she didn't give me the information I was seeking. And I said, why did I do what? And she goes, you know what you did? And I was like, I really don't. You're not giving me any information. And then she slapped me and started yelling at me. And that was a whole ordeal in and of itself. And then we got home and we walk in the door and something changed. I don't know what like clicked inside of her or kind of what part of her brain started firing. But she started off by throwing a cast iron skillet at me that I was able to dodge. And then she picked up a knife from the kitchen and started chasing me with that, saying she's going to kill me and she hates me and I'm going to pay for what I did. And I was able to run into my bedroom, which offshoots the kitchen where we were. And I locked the door and she eventually broke down the door. Took her a couple minutes, but she did it. And she pinned me to the ground. And, she had her hand around my neck and then it just stopped. She let go of me. She got up. She looked down at me and just left. She didn't say anything. She didn't do anything after that. She just stopped. And so I don't fully understand like what happened that night, what kind of psychotic break she had or what kind of, mental state she was in and what was affecting her. But so that happened. She tried to kill me when I was 16. And then I lived with my mom for another year after that. My sister actually reunited my father and I had told her what was going on with my mom, that, I didn't feel safe. And she had asked me if I wanted to get back together with my dad. And I said, you know what, I actually would. I had no reason to feel the way that I did about my father. I felt the way that I did because of what my mom had been saying about him for years. And as I grew closer to adulthood, I started to realize that those were just lies that she was telling me to get me on her side. The things she was saying about my father had never been, would never be true. My father had never done anything but love me and try and protect me. And so my sister reunited my father and I. I can so vividly remember the day that I saw him again after 3 years. We were actually at the mall together, like my sister and I were walking, and she goes, "Who's that?" And it was, we ended up walking towards my dad, and I like ran to my dad and I laid on the floor and cried, and he laid on the floor and cried with me because we were just, it was upsetting and hurtful and happy. And it was a really painful reunion, to be honest. But my father really stepped up to the plate and he moved back to the area he had moved away. He said it was very painful for him to be near me, but not to be able to, speak to me or see me. So he had moved away. So he moved back to where I was living at the time. He rented a house and he petitioned to get me away from my mother. And at the time I was 17, like I had some say in where I wanted to go. So I was able to, tell the court that I no longer wanted to be with my mother, that I wanted to be with my father. And so that's what happened. excuse me, within probably an 8-month period, my dad moved, got a house, and was able to get custody of me again. And so I lived with my father during my senior year of high school, from when I was 17 to when I turned 18. And that was when him and I really started rebuilding our relationship together. And to this day, my father and I are really, really close. We try and speak, once a week or so, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I live 700 miles away from him. But he has always been the provider for me and always given me the tools that I need to succeed in life. And he's been a very forward man in leading me in my relationship with God, which we both struggled with for a while. But he just really, like I said, stepped up to the plate and became like the parental figure that I needed. And, after that, went to college and all that, and we can get into that if you want, but that's the short version of the origin story.
It's like the TLDR.
Yeah, but it was still pretty long.
Yeah, I mean, it's heavy. It's a lot of intense stuff. I think a couple of things that come to mind. Why don't you kind of go over with people who are listening or watching your understanding of narcissism, like somebody who is a narcissist, how does that affect their behavior, and how might that be different from like a normal parent?
Sure. So for any listeners and viewers out there who may have seen the movie Mommy Dearest, that is actually based on the life of Joan Crawford, the actress, who was a kind of a closeted narcissist. People didn't fully understand the spectrum of what was going on behind closed doors, but she was very abusive to only one of her children. So what happens with narcissists is, first of all, I don't know if it's they don't realize or they choose not to recognize that they're sick. The world genuinely revolves around them. They are the center of their own universe. And if you're not also going to look at them as the center of the universe, you are worthless to them. They don't need you. They will play a lot of manipulative games with people to get them to be the center of everyone else's universe. But so what happens a lot with narcissists is they have relationships with people and they kind of choose the role that those people are going to be in. So you can either be in a favorable position with them where you're going to get, albeit probably not genuine, but concern and appreciation from them. And you're going to have a good relationship with them and they're going to show you their own twisted form of love. Or you're going to be their scapegoat. And the scapegoat is the one who is receiving the brunt of the abuse, whether it be verbal, mental, physical, whatever. But they are the ones who, if any little thing goes wrong in their life, the scapegoat is to blame. They are somehow tied to that thing that went wrong. If they'd never been born, then this never would have happened. My mom at one point told me she should have gotten an abortion when she was pregnant with me, that I had ruined her life. And so I was the scapegoat in my mom's life. And my sister was, again, older than me, so she wasn't physically present for a lot of these things. But my sister has always maintained, or at least a cordial relationship with my mom. It might not be that strong. It might not be that genuine, but, they're on speaking terms. They see each other kind of thing. And that's always how it's been. And then I was the scapegoat for my mom. And if you ever try and point out the behaviors of a narcissist and point out, this is what you're doing, I know you're manipulating me, I know you're lying, my mom is a pathological liar, I can never believe anything that comes out of her mouth, always take it with a grain of salt. If you try and point out these things to them, they're going to twist it around and make it so that you're the one who's unwell, you're the one who's lying. Again, they live in their own reality and they're going to do whatever it takes to manipulate you and get you to see their viewpoint. So it's very narcissist. It's such an abusive relationship with them, as particularly if you're their scapegoat. They are always going to find some way to manipulate you, abuse you. It is all take from them and no give. It's an extremely harmful relationship to be in with a narcissist.
For sure. I'm wondering, because we've talked before too, privately, about, early life wasn't the worst. There were good memories. Like there was a period that was pretty good. So what do you remember, a moment or a time when that changed, when something seemed to click and everything went a little bit different?
I can't believe I skipped over this part of my life. I very distinctly remember when
it's
my mom
a leading
changed.
question for a reason.
very distinctly remember when my mom changed. So when I was younger, life wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. You know, my parents fought all the time. A lot of people have parents who fight all the time. But you know, I always had a roof over my head. I always had food. I never had to worry about if we wouldn't eat or if we would get kicked out of our house. Like we were provided for. We had parents who had the ability to give us the things that we needed in life. We went to school, you know. It was fine. I would venture to call it average. It was just a pretty average childhood. You know, some things were a little more exciting than others. We had gone to Italy when I was 4, which I'm Italian, so we got to kind of go back to where my family's from, which was a lot of fun. So I mean, there were good experiences. I do, as much as I don't want to admit it, I have fond memories with my mom, but only when I was younger. And I kind of remember her always being, you know, hot-headed and quick to anger. But the thing that changed for her, the thing that really seemed to set her over the edge, was when I was I was born in 1996, happened in 2000 when I was 5. Her father killed himself. My mom is the only one from her family who moved out of Ohio. We were the only ones living in Michigan. All of her other family still lived within like a several block radius of where they grew up. They were very, very close to their childhood location. And my mom's mom had died of cancer long before my sister was born. My mom was in her 20s. So we never knew my mom's mom. She was never a part of, you know, the equation or the family or anything like that, as far as I'm concerned. But her relationship with her father was pretty rocky. There were times when they were close. There were times when, you know, they would joke and speak Sicilian with each other and share family recipes and family secrets and blah, blah, blah. And then there were times where they wouldn't talk for months because my grandpa said something to upset my mom, and my mom can hold a grudge like you would not believe. So she would hold a grudge against her father and refuse to speak with him. And so that was actually what was happening when he died. My mom had chosen not to speak with him for the time being. And we got a call in September of 2001 that my grandpa had shot himself and that we needed to get to Ohio right away. He was still alive at that point. He was at the hospital. But it's such awful circumstances. I can go into details if it's appropriate. If not, that's fine. What do you want me to do?
It's your story to tell.
Okay.
So you tell it however you like.
I think it offers context and important aspects of it. So
before you do that, disclaimer to those listening and watching, if you're, you know, it's not for the faint of heart whenever we go into this sort of gory detail and explicit information, but I will, you know, make a point to label the episode as explicit so people going in will know that there's sensitive content. Yeah,
so, you know, trigger warning for suicide is what we're going to be talking about. But so what had happened was my grandpa lived by himself. All of his children were adults with their own families. His wife had died. He actually lived kitty corner to his oldest son. So, you know, their backyards touched at the corner. And so he actually called my uncle and asked him to come over. And when my uncle opened the door, he heard a gunshot. So he went upstairs to where he heard it. And my grandpa had sat himself in his favorite chair in his bedroom and shot himself in the heart and was still alive. My uncle called 911. They got him to the hospital. He ended up dying very shortly after he arrived to the hospital. But he left a note in Italian. My grandpa was from Italy, born and raised there for most of his life. So he left a suicide note in Italian that when translated reads, "Life is shit." And to be fair, his life really was terrible. He had so many awful experiences happen to him. But so we got the call that my grandpa had shot himself, that we need to get to Ohio right away. And my mom was not one to sugarcoat anything pretty much ever. So she told me when I was 5 that my grandpa killed himself, that he took a gun, put it to his chest and pulled the trigger. So I pretty quickly learned the consequences of actions like that. You know, I'd experienced death. We live on a farm. That wasn't new to me, but it was new to hear of someone doing it to themselves. Like I'd not been exposed to that concept yet. But so, you know, we got to Ohio, he ended up passing away, went to the funeral, all that. And that sparked a really big internal conflict with my family. My mom being the person that she is, she's very argumentative, very hard-headed, very in her own reality. And so to her, all of the other family members, she has 2 brothers and a sister, turned against her. It was 3 against 1 in that scenario. Everyone was against my mother, and everyone was talking poorly about her and trying to screw her out of getting money or, family belongings or something like that. So she felt very, attacked and hurt by it. So she cut off everyone. We did not talk to my mom's side of the family for years, probably until I reunited with my dad. So for probably like 12 years, I did not have any contact with my mom's side of the family. And it was after my grandpa had killed himself, I came to recognize as an adult, my mom had no one to fear anymore. There was always, not that my grandpa had been abusive to her or ever like threatened her in any way, but he was an authority figure to her. She had a certain amount of respect for him, especially after the life experiences that he had. He had the right to kind of act the way that he did sometimes. And so my mom lost that authority figure in her life. And again, it was in a pretty traumatic way. But so she lost that looming, like, kind of threat, I guess. Again, like, he never threatened her, but she just had no one to fear anymore. She didn't fear my father. She didn't fear her brothers, like nothing like that. So she kind of quickly understood that she could behave in any way that she chose to, and nobody was going to stop her. My father was never abusive to either myself, my sister, or my mom. So he wasn't, going to shove her up against a wall and tell her to stop doing what she was doing. He would argue with her, but that's as far as it would go. So my mom knew if she kept engaging in this behavior, eventually she would get away with it. And so that was kind of the turning point for her, where she'd been slowly letting like parts of herself reveal themselves over the years, but then the veil completely came down after her dad died.
One thing that resonates and sort of keeps coming back around is that theme of loss, of people leaving and people dying and people not being there. Yep. So it might be good to, I don't know the answer to this myself. You might want to revisit and just kind of, bring in a couple of people who were like parental figures during that time when your dad wasn't there in your life and your mom was being your mom, and things were there people in there that were influencing you and sort of you could look up to and imitate?
It's tough because when I was in that 3-year period where I was isolated with my mom, I've since become really close with my mom's family again. I do have a really good relationship with her side of the family again. Thank goodness they did not hold me responsible for the actions of my mom. But during that time, that 3-year period, like, I was so isolated that there wasn't really anybody that I could reach out to. I held on very strongly to like teachers and coaches. I developed really good relationships with them. And there was, a couple people that maybe I developed a stronger relationship than others, like my gymnastics coach, my freshman and sophomore year, I got to be really, really close with, and I ended up working for her in different capacities. And, she always kind of looked out for me. But as far as that, I was still really close with, she's my best friend to this day. I've been best friends with her since I was 7. I've always been really close with her parents, and I knew I could kind of rely on them to keep an eye out on me and make sure that everything was okay. But I never felt safe enough to tell anybody what was happening. I never had that really, really close parental relationship with anybody where I felt safe enough to say, this is what's happening. I need your help. And that made it all the more difficult to get through those years without really struggling.
Speaking of coaches, I wanted to let you talk about your hobbies and interests a little bit. So what was little Katherine into, and what interest helped you pull through some of the heavier stuff? We'll come up for air a little bit on the heavy stuff.
I was a tomboy as a kid. I spent all my time outside. I was always climbing a tree or, building this fort kind of thing outside. Like I had the capability to do that. Like with the land that we had, I had so many adventures growing up, and I just spent a lot of time outside when I was a kid. And then kind of as I got older, I was very into reading when I was younger, and I'm still into reading now. I just don't do it very much, but books were like a good escape for me. And then as I got into high school, I'd always what I quote unquote call self-trained in gymnastics, meaning I taught myself how to do a cartwheel and that was it. But when I got to high school, we had a gymnastics team. And so I joined that. And that was something I could like really commit myself to and throw myself into for, 5 months out of the year. And it's still one of like the better experiences that I had during that time in my life. And I'm very grateful for the people that I met during that time and the experiences that I got to have. And I might not have been very good at it, but I had a lot of fun.
One other question that came to my mind as you were discussing that stuff from your childhood. So how do you think you just talked about faith and how you were sort of routine Christians, you went to church, prayed into all that stuff. But then on the other side, you had all these horrible experiences from these people who called themselves Christians. So it's specifically your mother. So like, how does that inform your feelings and opinions about it today? Does that change your mind about it? Does that make it come across weaker for you?
I would say today it doesn't have an effect on my relationship with God or my belief system or anything, but that period of time in high school where I was being, threatened and abused every day, it really did affect my relationship with God. We grew up, we were kind of like you said, kind of the routine Christians. We went to church on Sunday, we did the church activities, but my parents at that time did not do a very good job of exemplifying like how to live as Christians. It was more like a checklist. Like these are the things that we should be doing or have to do. And my father has since, really developed in his faith and shown me how to walk with God. But just as a child, it felt very routine. Like, okay, I guess we're going to church today because today's Sunday, or we're going to church today because, it's Christmas or something like that. But I had developed my own relationship with God, once I was old enough to understand like the concept of God and heaven and hell and, able to read through the Bible and like really understand the stories. And so when I separated from my father and when my mom started getting really abusive, I did struggle a lot with my faith. I questioned, I never questioned if God was real. I always genuinely believed that he is, but I struggled with why he was letting this happen to me, and why he wouldn't help me get out of it. I prayed every night for him to somehow change my circumstances, to, send this essentially savior into my life and like pull me out of what I was experiencing, or for, a teacher at school just to kind of question like those bruises on my leg and, pull me aside and ask if they can help me, and just waiting for somebody to help me. And it never happened. And even when I tried to save myself, it failed. Like it almost killed me. And it was really tough to feel love for God at that time. Like I just really struggled with believing in the goodness of God and his provision and his mercy. And then after I, redeveloped my relationship with my dad, I saw that, it's quite commonly said, but it is true, like everything happens for a reason. I did go through those experiences for the reason of, someone hears my story and they're, inspired some way to like help somebody else or anything. Like it doesn't really matter all that much, but it happened for a reason. And to be honest, like glad it happened to me and not my sister. Like I would never want my sister to experience anything like that. And I'm, again, grateful for the way that everything turned out. It was a horrendous experience. Like I wouldn't go back and relive it, but I also wouldn't undo it. It made me the person that I am today. And it also does help deepen my relationship with God, where I can look back and realize that like he didn't abandon me in that time. He was still loving me and still supporting me and seeing me through, whether or not I believed it. Like I never was abandoned. I never was alone. And it does have an impact on my relationship with God to this day.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a common thread, that you have this routine Christianity and people go to church and they go through the motions and they learn how to pray and they read the Bible, but then they don't understand how to have a relationship with God, like one-to-one, this is my best friend kind of relationship. And it's so damaging. And then on top of that, for you, it's abuse and neglect and loss. And it's like, so it's incredible that you came out the other side with that faith. And so I definitely want to revisit that later for another question, another topic, like sort of how does that inform your faith now, and what you would say to people who are struggling through that similar situation. I do want to transition a little bit and talk about travel, because you've done a lot of traveling. So we have local travel, which is more like Michigan to North Carolina trek, a little bit of a journey. And then there's like global travel. There's flying to Haiti and to Tanzania and all these places. So where do you want to start? What story would you like to share with us about travel?
We can start local and work our way across the globe. So as I said, I am not from North Carolina. That's where Travis and I currently reside. I'm from Michigan, and my brother moved to North Carolina about 5 years before I did. And I'd come to visit him one year, and I'd been looking for not really a reason, but just an opportunity to leave Michigan. I do not like the cold weather. I do not like the snow. I have never liked it. And so I was just looking to go somewhere else. I had been a nurse for about 2 years at that point. I felt pretty comfortable in my skill set. I was looking for another job. COVID is a whole different aspect to that story, but I was just looking for an opportunity to leave, and I was looking for some place to go. And I started looking into warmer climates. I looked into moving to Texas, to Hawaii, to California, to Louisiana, and all of those places. It seemed like everything really fell into place to move to North Carolina. I was able to find some good job opportunities. I was able to find a good place to live that was affordable for me. I wouldn't be alone. Travis and I had not met at that time, and I had my brother, and he was going to be there to support me and, just really be there for me and kind of show me like how to get my feet on the ground in North Carolina. So it really all just came together. And so I'll kind of get into the COVID aspect of it. So COVID hit, like early 2020. And at first it didn't seem like a big deal. It seemed just, I'll be honest, like I dubbed it another flu, like right at the beginning. It didn't seem like a very big deal. It didn't seem like it was going to be all that deadly or as like massive as it was. I had no idea we were preparing for a pandemic. But so COVID actually shut down my hospital in April of 2020. The hospital system that I had been working for decided our facility, being one of the smaller facilities, frankly wasn't worth the money to keep up and running during COVID. So we moved all of our patients out to other branches of our hospital organization, and they shut down our hospital, and they gave us an opportunity to either leave or transfer to another facility. And I had already been thinking about moving out of Michigan at this time. And so it just kind of gave me like the push that I needed, and it gave me an opportunity to leave. I quit my job. I quit my second job. And I was, again, able to find everything in North Carolina, and it fell into place. And so in June of 2020, in, one of the mists of the pandemic, I moved, and I did a road trip like down from Michigan to North Carolina. I had movers that moved all my stuff, so I didn't have to worry about, driving a U-Haul or anything like that. I was in my own car, by myself. I wasn't in a relationship at the time. It was just me. And so I took, I think, 5 days. I stopped in a bunch of different states and saw different national forests and different, areas. Like I'd been to the Smoky Mountains before. I'd never been to the Blue Ridge Mountains. So that was like one of the stops that I made. And that was probably my favorite part of the trip. But I just got to do a lot of really cool and exciting things, and I was doing them by myself. And that was exciting. I was in control of what was happening. And if I decided I was too tired one day to go do anything, then I didn't have to do anything. But I got to see a lot of really cool parts of the United States that I hadn't been exposed to before. And there's still so many more that I would like to be exposed to. But that was that's like the most extensive local travel that I've done. And then as far as international travel, for going chronologically, I went to Italy when I was 4 with my family. I remember small bits and pieces of it. I remember in particular, I don't know what it means in Italian, but they call like little girls little bambini, and they gave me free things. It was very nice. I really enjoyed it. I got like free gelato. I remember a teddy bear that I got. because little girls, if you go up and you say little bambini and you pat their head, you get good luck. And so I loved it because I didn't care that they were touching me because I was going to get something for free. So that's the part that I remember the most. That and all the walking. My gosh, we did so much walking. But I would love to go back to Italy and re-experience it as an adult. I think my next trip was, hold on, I gotta think about this. It would have been Taiwan, would have been my next trip. My second to last semester of college, I did a study abroad program where we took nursing students from Taiwan, brought them to the US, and then we took nursing students from the US and put them in Taiwan. And I was a part of that exchange program, and we were there for 2 weeks. And, you know, we had to do a research project and present it to the people of Taiwan. We had translators that were with us, students from the local university. And my gosh, Taiwan is absolutely gorgeous. And it's small enough that you can get from like the top of Taiwan to the bottom of Taiwan in like less than a day. We didn't quite do as much traveling, but we got to see some really, really beautiful locations. Sun Moon Lake is one of the most beautiful like natural landscapes that I've ever been to. And, you know, I got to try incredible food, and I made some really good friends from that time. So that was a really, really valuable experience. And thankfully, I was able to obtain a scholarship to go to Taiwan. So I didn't even have to pay for it. I paid for my flight, but I did not pay for like the actual course of like the college course of going to Taiwan. So that was a really valuable experience for me. And then my next trip would have been to Haiti for the first time. I've been to Haiti twice, and that was for a medical mission trip, again with my college, where we have a partnership with a foundation called Foundation for Peace, and they have different kind of like home bases that they have. One is in Haiti, one is in the Dominican Republic, and one is in Kenya. And so in 2000, what year did I graduate? 2018, February of 2018, I went to Haiti for the first time, and that was for, like I said, the medical mission trip. I had just graduated from nursing school. I wasn't licensed as a nurse yet, but, you know, I had the training, and we went to Haiti for a week, and we set up mobile clinics, and we went with nurses, nursing students, physician assistant, and physician assistant students, and then we have a doctor who lives and is stationed in Haiti, and he comes to assist us when we come in case of any, like, you know, emergencies or more complex cases that we're not quite able to pay enough attention to. But so I did that. I fell in love with the people of Haiti, and I fell in love with the culture, and I fell in love with the group of people that I went down with. There's kind of a core group that maybe 5 of us that have kind of traveled together since then, and we've kind of led other groups on these journeys. But that was my first time in Haiti. Absolutely adored it. And then I was home for like 4 days, and then I moved to Tanzania for 6 weeks to also do a like medical internship. So I did an internship in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which is on the east coast of Africa, like southeastern coast of Africa. And I was like staffed, quote unquote, staffed as a member of one of the national hospitals there that's run by the government. And I chose to work in pediatrics because at the time that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into pediatrics. And so I was able to tour different units of the hospital and work there. And, you know, I was there 4 to 5 days a week, staffed with the other nurses. I learned how to speak Swahili, and I was able to live with other international students who I believe we had students from, I was the only American, but we had students from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Belgium. And we all lived in the same house together, and we were all medical students in one way or another. We had doctors, midwives, and nurses. And we would go to the hospital each day, and we would, you know, do our job. And then we had the weekends and the evenings available to us. So we would go out and we would explore Tanzania. There was a weekend that we took a boat out to the island of Zanzibar and spent a weekend on the island of Zanzibar and got to learn all about the culture there. And a lot of the spices that we use are from Zanzibar, which is a fun fact I didn't know. But it was just, again, a really, really incredible experience, very eye-opening as far as different cultures. When I was in Tanzania, I lived with a host family for a week out in a place called Kidoti Village, which is near the Kenyan border, so much farther north than Dar es Salaam. And just seeing the cultural differences there, they have electricity for like 2 hours a day every day. And so they have to make the most of that time that they have electricity, and it comes in spurts in the community. So, like one grid block will have electricity for 2 hours and then they'll shut it down. And then another grid block will have electricity for 2 hours and they'll shut it down, and so on. So that was really interesting. I didn't shower for a week because we didn't have the ability to. I showered in a waterfall like the last day that I was there. But we got to work in a local clinic there, and just seeing the cultural differences and like the different health disparities that the people of Tanzania experience, because pretty much unless they're dying, like they don't seek out medical assistance, because similarly between Haiti and Tanzania, if you can't afford healthcare, they just turn you away. There is no policy like in the US where you treat despite insurance. Pretty much if you don't have the money up front to pay for whatever's going on with you, if you're having a heart attack, like if you can't pay, they're just going to tell you to leave and pretty much go die at home. It's really, really unfortunate and a very sad scenario to see. And then there's just a huge lack of resources and a huge lack of available staff members for the unit. I saw some really, really awful things over there that I would never want to experience again. But again, an incredibly valuable experience that grew a fondness for Tanzania for me. That's a place that I would eventually like to move to, and be Tanzania. Again, the culture is amazing. The people are amazing. Swahili is such a fun language. And it was just such a beautiful place that it's got a really special place in my heart. And then the following year, I went to the Dominican Republic for the medical mission trip again. And we were meant to go to Haiti again that year, but there was a ton of political unrest in Haiti that year where it was deemed too dangerous for us to go. The city that we go to, Port-au-Prince, was incredibly dangerous at the time. There was a lot of random gunfire and people that were just being killed in the streets for really no reason. They were trying to assassinate their president. It was a really, really dangerous place to be. So about 2 weeks before we were meant to go, we got pushed into the Dominican Republic, which is the island of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. They just share a border together. It's one island. So we got pushed to the other side. We got to go to the Dominican Republic. And it was a completely different experience because the Dominican Republic was colonized by the Spanish and Haiti was colonized by the French. So they have completely different cultures, completely different languages, completely different styles of food. So that was also a really unique and interesting experience. We worked with the same Foundation for Peace. We just worked with their DR community, and we got to really do the same thing, go out, create mobile clinics and treat people and all of that. And it was a really good experience as well. And then I went to Haiti again the next year, and that would have been in 2019, would have been the last year, because then COVID hit and we had to shut down all of our international travel, due to safety concerns. And we haven't been back to Haiti since. But I think that covers all of my international travel. I think that's it.
So I thought of a fun question while you were working through it. Starting with Michigan and working your way out, what's one food or experience or activity that you missed from each one of those places that you'd love to bring to North Carolina?
If I could bring one thing from Michigan to North Carolina, it would be the soda Verner's. It's a ginger ale. It's like Schweppes or like Seagram's or anything like that. But I kid you not, it will cure your ailments. It is a miracle pop. It's incredible and tastes really good too. So Verner's, there's a joke in Michigan and like among the Midwestern states that if you're not feeling well, like just go drink some Verner's, you'll be fine. I adore Verner's. I would also bring Faygo here, which is another, we have Faygo in North Carolina, but the amount of flavors that y'all have in North Carolina is nothing compared to what we have in Michigan. We have like 30 different flavors of Faygo. It's amazing. But if I could bring something from Taiwan over to the US, it would be their sweet and sour sauce. Sweet and sour sauce in the US, terrible. Just disgusting. Never want it. Sweet and sour sauce in Taiwan, I would drink it out of a bottle. It is so good. Oh my gosh, it's what I ordered every time we went out to lunch. It was just like sweet and sour chicken, sweet and sour fish, something delicious. If I could bring something from Haiti to North Carolina, it would be fried plantains. Again, you can get them here in the US, but like you cannot beat somebody who chops up a plantain and batters it and fries it and hands it to you. Ugh, they're so good. My gosh. Don't eat a plantain raw, please. They're not very good. But fried plantain's delicious. If I could bring something from the DR, and it exists in North Carolina. It's very difficult to find, really in any U.S. state as far as I've known. I'm totally blanking on the name, but there is a vegetable that in the DR is deemed like the miracle vegetable, the vegetable of youth. They say if you eat it every day, you'll live to be like 120 years old. I cannot for the life of me remember what it's called, but it's absolutely delicious. And we ate it every day. And I'm very sad that I can't like regularly get it. And then if I could bring something over from Tanzania, it would be chapati, which is a type of flatbread. It's similar to, if you eat Indian food, it's similar to paranta. If you eat Mediterranean food, it's similar to like a pita. Not quite like a tortilla. It's much thicker than that, but it's just like a thick kind of flatbread, but it's got different flavors to it, and it's always got like melted butter on the top. I wasn't feeling good one day, and that was the only thing I wanted to eat was just like 6 chapati, which they're so good. And I did get taught how to make them, but they're a labor of love. They take a long time to make, and then, make them well is another story. But if I could just have them available to me in Michigan, I'd be set. Not Michigan, North Carolina.
I was going to say, we have some pretty good stuff in North Carolina.
I mean, we do. I mean, I will say the ethnic diversity among the people in North Carolina where we're located it's more expanded than the cultural diversity and the ethnic diversity I experienced in Michigan, where I was living in Michigan, the latter part of my life. We had the highest concentration of like Middle Eastern and Indian people within the continental U.S. Like it is kind of a metropolis for those, for that ethnic group. But then here, I can find anything I want here. I can find Ethiopian food. I can find Lebanese food. I have found Tanzanian food here before. I have a lot of really great Indian grocery stores and restaurants that I love to go to. It's so much more ethnically diverse here. I will say that.
It's just none of it's authentic. It's all homemade on the North Carolinian way.
I don't know. Some of it is authentic. A couple Indian places that we go to, I would consider authentic. It's just hard to find.
Yeah, it's like you lessen the quality a little, but you have a lot of options.
Yeah.
So you can go and find whatever you're looking for, and it won't be exactly the same experience, but it'll be quality.
Yeah. I'm not sitting on the beach like looking out at a beautiful ocean while eating my chapati, but it's fine.
How do you feel about anything else you want to go over regarding travel? Anything that maybe we've looked over? Any recommendations? Like if you had to say for someone listening, the one place you only get to go to one, where would you send them?
Ooh, I'm really biased towards Tanzania. It's where I went. It's where I spent the most time. It's where I had the most valuable and memorable and kind of life-shaping experiences. I'm going to stick with Tanzania only because of the diversity, like geographically, that's offered within Tanzania. So if you don't know, like I said, Tanzania is on the southeastern border of Africa, sandwiched kind of between like South Africa and Kenya. I can't remember if there's another country below Tanzania, but it might be South Africa and Kenya. No, Kenya's on top. But so the border between Kenya and Tanzania is where the Serengeti is, which most people have heard of the Serengeti. It's one of like the largest nature reserves in Africa, and there's people safari there all the time. It's got Mount Kilimanjaro there. So it's pretty well known, and that's at the top of Tanzania. And as you venture downwards, you get a little more coastal and a little more kind of, I don't want to call it country, but like just inland. There's mountains everywhere, and then the coasts are absolutely gorgeous. I went snorkeling in the ocean. The water is crystal clear, and the weather there is unbelievable. It's so warm. It's just, I would recommend Tanzania out of all the places that I've been. There's so much to do and so much to see.
Cool. I want to go into, for this next segment, the long-term effects of trauma and how trauma affects the mind. And I think that you can provide a lot of insight and illumination on that, starting with CPTSD, which is complex PTSD. So maybe just give us some information about that and how you understand it and how you feel about it, how it relates to you.
Okay. So yeah, CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is the difference between CPTSD and PTSD is complex PTSD, is several instances of trauma exposure over a longer period of time. So you can develop PTSD The most common example is a soldier that goes to war. They experience really terrible things over there. Maybe their unit, like they're driving a Humvee and there's a bomb that goes off. That can and probably will cause PTSD. That is a lone traumatic experience. CPTSD is often the result of like abusive relationships where you're experiencing different forms of trauma over a longer period of time. So I've been diagnosed with CPTSD due to the abuse that I suffered from my mom for several years. And some experiences were more traumatic than others, but overall it led to the diagnosis of CPTSD. And kind of a long-term lasting effect of somebody with CPTSD is it's hard for their brain to differentiate what is a threat and what is not. Their brain kind of automatically goes into that fight or flight mode where even if it's anything that we perceive as a threat, whether or not it's an actual threat is a different story. But, if someone starts yelling at me, that fight or flight kicks in, I get nervous. I try and figure out, okay, why are they yelling at me? Like I overanalyze the situation. I try and figure out what's going on. Why are they acting the way that they're acting? What did I do wrong? Where, if someone were to yell at Travis, he might just take it and, move on with his day. Like might take the criticism and move on or whatever it is. But I would almost go into that fight or flight response. Sorry, what was the second part of the question? I already forgot.
Well, just what you're doing, just elaborating on CPTSD and then how it affects your mind specifically.
Okay. So again, CPTSD, it causes us to overreact and become hypervigilant in what other people would perceive as like relatively normal scenarios. And it overall causes like a lot of anxiety. It can lead to dissociation. So that's where, your body is physically present in a situation, but your mind kind of takes a step back, and it's to prevent further trauma. Like your brain taking that step back is kind of eliminating that trauma from happening again. Because if you're not present for it with your mind, like how am I going to be traumatized by it if I can't remember it? So I might as well just step back. Or like you might not be able to physically leave that scenario, but you can almost kind of numb out or feel empty or feel just kind of nothing at all. And that's your brain trying to protect itself from the trauma moving forward. And that's why people who experience like traumatic childhoods have such large gaps in their childhood. That's dissociation, and that's their brain trying to protect them from remembering that painful scenario. And again, that's a result of CPTSD. I'm sure there's more to say, but that's what I got for right now.
How does that, just the dissociation, the strong, intense emotions, the PTSD itself, how does it manifest like today in daily life? What's something that you can expect?
So I mean, something you mentioned, people with CPTSD tend to experience emotions a lot stronger than other people. And it seems like they're overreacting to certain situations where, maybe someone dies in a movie, like might get a little tearful about it. I might get really, really upset about it because I tie it to an experience that I've had, or it's just I experience things so strongly that I'm like taking it to heart when it really doesn't have any consequential effects on my life. But navigating CPTSD in day-to-day life, it's important for people like me to have an understanding that it is very rare that somebody's actually threatening me. Like whether or not I'm being yelled at or someone's getting maybe physically closer than I would like them to, it is a very rare circumstance that person is actually looking to hurt me. And, it's just being very self-aware of what you're experiencing and what you've experienced in the past and trying to stay grounded and not go into that fight or flight mode and recognize what you're feeling. And as my therapist would say, staying an adult, not going into that child mode where you either run away or you act out against the person that you're perceiving to be threatening you, where you stay an adult and you have the understanding that, no, this is a relatively normal experience and I can have a relatively normal reaction to it. Or if you are, feeling like you're going to overreact to it, just recognizing that and recognizing that I should probably try and not make any harsh decisions right now, or Just ask to take a break from the situation and step away and kind of clear your mind a little bit. But it does cause the person who's experienced CPTSD to be very aware of themselves and their feelings and the experiences going on around them, and figuring out how to navigate those feelings in your day-to-day life without overreacting.
It is jarring, and just to get a little personal with it, whenever we started dating, just the experience of this person that I'm in conversation with and activities and things like that, just sort of shutting down and leaving the space while not having left the space. It's a pretty crazy experience, and it takes a while to get used to that. That person who maybe is disassociated just in the middle of a talk or a dinner or whatever. So, what is that like for you? Are you still there, or are you totally thinking somewhere else?
So what I'm going to speak to is my personal experience. Other people may experience it differently than I do, but I am aware when I'm dissociating or I'm becoming much more distant. The way I've explained it in the past is kind of like I said earlier. It's like my body is physically present, but my mind is like maybe outside that door, where it's like I'm close enough. I can perceive what's going on and I can maybe respond to external stimuli. I can maybe still engage in the conversation, but I might not be able to pay as close attention. I might not give responses very quickly, or if it's the next day, I might not fully remember what happened. And for me, it's such a unique experience, and like a unique feeling that it almost does feel like my body and my mind are separate entities, and I can feel that they're no longer together. I can, be sitting in this chair, but I'm aware that my mind is somewhere else. And it's not even that my mind is somewhere else that I'm thinking of something else. I'm not thinking about, well, what are we going to have for dinner tomorrow? I'm just numb and I'm empty, and I'm trying not to feel anything right now because I've probably perceived some sort of threat. Like if we're having a more serious conversation about something that I'm uncomfortable with, or something with my past, or something that just generally causes me anxiety, my first inclination is to shut down, because if I shut down, you can't hurt me. And so that's something that I'm working through in therapy, is to not have that inclination to just shut down, is to remain present, experience the feelings that I'm having, and work through it in the moment.
What's the description that you have given me before with the spoons? That's a really good descriptor for what you experience.
So it's not totally related to CPTSD. It's just related to, various mental illnesses. It started with the chronically ill community. So people who are experiencing chronic illness. I'll be honest, I first saw it on TikTok, but essentially what like the spoons is, everybody starts the day with, let's say, 6 spoons, and each spoon gives you the ability to do something. So Travis and I have 6 spoons in the morning. We both wake up, and with 1 spoon, Travis has the ability to get out of bed, take a shower, make himself breakfast, and sit down at his desk. He can do 4 things with 1 spoon. There's enough room on that spoon to fit 4 things. Me, who struggles both like physically and mentally with my health, where I can get very easily fatigued, I can get very easily overwhelmed or anxious, my spoons hold less. So I might have 6 spoons for the day, but it takes 1 spoon just to get out of bed. That has nothing to do with taking a shower, making myself breakfast, going to the grocery store. I have other spoons I have to use for that. And when I run out, I'm done. I don't have any energy left. I don't have anything left to give. And it can be frustrating for someone on the receiving end of somebody who ran out of spoons for the day, because it can feel like they're possibly being lazy, or they're overreacting to certain scenarios, or it can come across very easily, and it may feel that way to that person as like just depression, where, maybe they crawled back in bed and haven't gotten out of bed, and, went to bed at 3 p.m., where it's like, that's not usually what a person would do. But like once I'm out of spoons, I just don't have any left, and I have to wait until tomorrow and see what I can do with my spoons.
I think it's a easier way to understand what's going on, to have that mental picture. How do you feel about yourself?
In general?
Uh, sure. How do you feel about yourself generally?
Due to the trauma that I've been on the receiving end of and like the things that have been said to me, particularly from my mother, I have very poor self-image. Like I hold myself in a very low place. I don't give myself credit for like the things that I've accomplished or the things that I've done, or if somebody like my husband or my boss or somebody, compliments me on something, I find something wrong with it to hold on to. I don't take that compliment and I'm like, well, I probably could have done that differently and it would have been even better. So I guess thank you, but I'll be better next time. It's always, I didn't do enough and I'm not enough. And that's something that I feel every single day of my life is that I'm not enough and I'm not doing enough. And that again, like plays into the spoons thing where I feel guilty when I run out of spoons. Like I should have been able to do more with the spoons that I had, but I just couldn't. And there's nothing I can do about that. But it's still really frustrating for me because I feel obligated or like, a part of societal roles. Like I should be doing these things, but I just can't.
And I think there's a learning point there too, because if you're dating someone or your sibling or son or daughter or mother, father, whoever is dealing with these kinds of mental health issues, it can be really insensitive to say, well, just be better, get better, move past it, get over it kind of thing. Like it's such a quick thing to come to mind to say because you from the outsider perspective, you feel like they should just be able to overcome this thing and be different. But you're not considering how much trauma and the weight of that trauma made the effects that it has long term on that person. So how would you suggest or provide any kind of advice for people who maybe has a loved one in that situation? That how would you advise them to respond in a way that's good or healthy?
I think the first aspect of it is communicating with your partner, child, spouse, like whoever it is, whoever the person is that's experiencing the CPTSD, communicate with them, ask what they need. Each person has different needs. Like when I'm really struggling and I get asked to do a task, it can like send me over the edge. Like I get very upset. I get very overwhelmed because I know I don't have it in me, but he doesn't know that. And he maybe asked me to put my dish in the sink, something that should be really, really easy, but that was my breaking point. He didn't know that. So I guess just, ask whoever the person is what they're going to need. For me, a lot of it, Travis, now that we're married, has gotten very good at recognizing when I'm dissociating, when I'm feeling really distant, when I have kind of nothing left in me, and he's able to act accordingly. But a lot of it is giving the person space. It can be so easy to, I don't want to say smother, that's not a nice word, but it can be so easy to, get close to that person and feel like you have to take care of them when that's not really the scenario. Like in all likelihood, like they're probably an adult, they're probably capable of caring for themselves, but unless they are like a genuine danger to themselves or somebody else, like they might just need some time. They might just need to try again tomorrow. And a lot of patience is required to be in a relationship with somebody who has CPTSD because they're going to have good days and bad days, and the good days are really good and the bad days are really bad. And it takes a lot of patience to deal with the fluctuation in emotions and, mental capability and physical capability to engage in certain things.
How would you say that well, number one, how would you say that you cope with some of the feelings and the experiences you have? And then how would you say that you're healing? What things are you doing to ultimately overcome the trauma?
I would say the coping mechanisms that I've developed, one that I'm working through my therapist right now is to write, to just be cognizant of the things that I'm feeling. And even if it is, I'm feeling dissociated, I'm feeling empty, I'm feeling distant, just to write it down. Because for me personally, I tend to just like shove it down and then it just becomes a problem later on. Like I didn't solve anything by shoving that down. I solved it temporarily. Maybe for 5 minutes, I'll be okay. But in 10 minutes, I'm still going to have to deal with that. So it's easier to just deal with it right then. I think also and it's kind of the other side of the token, distracting yourself can be really helpful, just to take away that feeling of being overwhelmed or anxious or like your head is underwater. Just doing something that you enjoy. I love doing puzzles personally. Like that's something that I can distract myself with. The thing that I struggle with the most is control. Like I get really, really stressed out if I'm not in control of a certain situation or, certain things that are happening around me with other people. And so a puzzle is something that's really simple that I can control. Like I have a task designated to me, finish the puzzle, put it together, and I have an expectation of what it's going to look like as well. I have an expectation of what the end result will be. I just have to do it. And if I have like the physical capability to do it, it's just a way for me to stop thinking about the emotions running through my head or the racing thoughts and kind of put those things aside for a little bit and focus on the task at hand. Of course, you still need to go back and deal with whatever it was you were feeling and whatever it is you were experiencing, but sometimes the distraction is a nice place to start. What was the second half of your question?
How are you healing? Yep. And just a little aside to piggyback on what she said, she also doesn't like when people do her puzzles with her.
Yeah.
She likes to do her puzzles by herself.
It's the control. I like to be the one to finish it and do it and know that I'm the one who put in the effort.
Yeah, I would highly recommend Katherine get into speed running, and I've talked about this before. So if you don't know what that is, there are people who love certain video games, and they will play those games over and over and over for hours and hours every day to try to complete the game as fast as possible. I just feel like that would be such a great activity for you because you could do it over and over, so you get to repeat the same thing, and you're always just playing against yourself. You have all the control.
Well, something to take into consideration. As far as how am I healing, therapy has been a really big aspect of my life since high school. I've been to different therapists on and off, and I've tried different kinds of therapy, and I've found certain things work better for me than others. Certain types of therapists work better for me than others. But therapy is a really big way for me to heal. I'm in a group therapy, and hearing other people's experiences and knowing that I'm not the only one who either feels this way or has this kind of process that they go through or experiences these emotions. Like there are other people out there who also dissociate when things get to be too much. And I know that I'm not alone, and I can hear about how they cope with it or how they address it in that moment and maybe able to give me something new to try. I think another way to heal it is part of it is faith, is like asking, not just straight up asking God to heal you, but, putting in the work and understanding his grace and his mercy and his provision. And for me personally, part of my healing is being able to forgive my mother, which is something that I haven't done yet. But I'm not going to be able to do that on my own. I'm not going to have that capability or that I'm not going to be able to go through that process on my own. That's not something that I'm capable of. And I know that. And that's something that I'm going to have to work through with my relationship with God, is to work towards that forgiveness and that healing. I would say for me, those are probably the two biggest things.
Cool. I support those fully in whatever capacity you're pursuing them. So let's talk about nursing. So let's get into vocation. Okay. So when did you know that you wanted to be a nurse?
So for context, I've been a nurse for about 4 years now. So growing up, I wanted to be a vet. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with animals. I wanted to start my own practice. I think growing up on the farm is kind of what drove that. We had the vet on the farm a lot because we had a lot of issues. And I really enjoyed what she did and like her mannerisms and her as a person. I just really enjoyed her, and I kind of wanted to emulate her growing up. And then I think probably 7th or 8th grade, I just had the idea, well, what if I worked with people instead of animals? It's not that I lost my passion for animals or anything like that. I think I just realized that there's like another opportunity. Also, veterinary school is a huge undertaking that I was not really looking forward to. I also did not have the desire to become a doctor. I did not want to go through med school. I did not want to put myself through such a long process for like such a little reward for so long. So then the next idea came to be nursing. And it's one of those things that when I thought of it, it just clicked. It was like, yes, that is it. That is the thing that I want to do. I don't have questions about it. I don't have doubts about it. I want to be there to help people when they're vulnerable, and I want to be there to see people get through some of the worst times of their lives. Now I'm an ICU nurse, so we do see people at the worst times of their lives for their families, for themselves, and being able to either see them through to their healing process is really, really fulfilling. Or we talked about this in my work meeting earlier today, just being able to give them death with dignity is also a really big part of ICU nursing. Just realizing we can't save everybody, but also being able to realize that I can make them comfortable and make them dignified in death. So nursing is just one of those things that once I realized I wanted to do it, it felt right. And I didn't have any doubts about it.
And how did your early life experiences, did that contribute at all to your decision, or is it or not related?
I think really the only tie to early life was I had appendicitis when I was 7, and I was very, very sick from that. And I remember being in the hospital afterwards. I loved the nurses. I loved how fun they were, and I loved how they made a pretty difficult and like painful experience just a little bit better. Like they allowed my friend to come into the hospital and play like a computer game with me. It seems so silly looking back, but it mattered to me. Like it mattered that I got to do that and I got to feel good about that. And I wanted at some point to do that for other people. And it clicked a little bit later in life that that's something that I would want to do. But I would say that's probably like the tie to my early life.
And I'm glad that you do that, because I'm not built for that environment at all. If I visit a doctor office or a hospital, I want to pass out immediately. It's all terrifying. So I'm glad that there are people with the stomach and the mental toughness to be a nurse, especially in the ICU. And you've spent a lot of your career so far just dealing with COVID. I mean, that really changed a lot of things.
Yeah. So I've been a nurse for 4 years. COVID's been a thing for about 2. So when I was in Michigan, I was a nurse for 2 years in cardiac progressive care. We were a step-down ICU, step down from ICU. So we still had complex patients. We still had patients who were sicker than, just a pneumonia or something like that. And they were cardiac patients. They were a little more fragile than the other patient population. So I did that for 2 years. And then my hospital got shut down. And I moved to North Carolina. And at that point, I felt that I had learned what I was able to learn in that capacity. I felt very confident in my skills, and I felt like I was ready to move on to something else. And the next logical step up for me would have been ICU. And that was a time in the country when ICU nurses were very much a hot commodity and hot to come by, or hard to come by. I was not trained as an ICU nurse, but I was willing to step into the role in a very, very difficult time in the healthcare community. And that it plays into my trauma. It was a very traumatizing experience for the last 2 years. Experienced and saw some things that I would never wish on anybody. I would never want to experience again. But again, it's one of those experiences that it helped shape me who I am as a person and as a nurse. Like I have a completely different understanding of what nursing is than I did 4 years ago. And it is because of the things that we went through during COVID.
Absolutely. So we have the 2 deepest and hardest questions remaining. And once we tackle those, we can get into concluding. So number 1 is, how do we overcome the war inside the mind? In a very general sense.
You're speaking for the general population?
Yeah, I'm just assuming that there are people who have had traumatic experiences, negative experiences, pain, loss, some of the things you went through, maybe not to the same extent, but definitely some of the same experiences. And obviously that stuff leaves a lasting impact and leaves a lot to heal and work through. So, what is your understanding of how that's done?
I would say there are a couple components to it. The first one, and probably the biggest one for me, is understanding that it cannot be done alone. Like, asking for help is something that I really struggle with. It's something that I feel very weak when I have to ask for help, and I feel like it's one of those I'm not good enough moments. Like, I should be able to handle it by myself. There's a lot of I should in my life. But asking for help is huge, whether you're asking for help from your parents, your siblings, your friends, a therapist, like a coworker, whoever. Just being able to get down to that level of vulnerability, recognize that it can't be done on my own and I need somebody else to help me. And even if you don't know where to start, just saying, I don't know what I need, but I need help. Somebody is going to be able to get you to that point where you're going to get the help that you need. And another important aspect to realize is that after you ask for help, that's kind of the hard part, is after you ask for help. That's when you have to put in the work. Fighting the war inside your mind can't be done passively. It's something that has to actively be attended to every single day. And there are going to be days where it's a little bit easier, and there are going to be days where it's much more difficult. And pushing through those difficult days to get to the times where it's easier is worth it. So I'd say those are probably the two biggest aspects of it.
And then I'm definitely a big believer that a person's calling, a person's faith, a person's family system, a person's support, those are all important parts of day-to-day life, and just not just mental health type things or trauma or struggles, but just getting through like routine stuff that we all have to deal with. So, and it's almost like putting a puzzle together. Like, you need every piece to really live fulfilled life and survive a lot of the struggles that we go through. So just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll transition into the last part.
Can you condense the question a little more?
The scope of the question?
Yes.
Okay. So faith, calling, family, all, like I said, it's like a puzzle. You need all those different pieces to have one cohesive picture, and that's how we survive and get from day to day. So would you say that's true for you? And then if so, how does that all work together?
Okay. I would say it is true for me. There's a lot of components that factor into, healing the trauma and moving forward with my life and being able to grow and mature and become the person that I want to be. Part of it is like my family system and identifying who I want in my family system. Like, I cut my mom off when I was 17. I haven't spoken to her in 9 years. I haven't had any interaction with her. And that's because that's what was best for me. I had to take myself into consideration, and I had to put myself first in that scenario. So just identifying the family system that you want in your life is important, because those are the people who are going to be there when you're down, and those are the people who are going to kind of pull you out of the mud when you need it. For me personally, faith is a really important aspect of it. I understand it may not be for everybody, but I would implore you to explore the realm of faith and spirituality and what your belief system may be. And that is another scenario where you can ask for help. You might just be curious, but you might not know where to start. And you can ask somebody, or, Google exists, can answer a lot of questions.
Provide some answers.
Yeah, I would say that all of those things are an important aspect of healing. And, you may have one and not the other, and it may take time to figure out your family systems or figure out your faith or something like that. But again, the biggest part of it is this is an active war that you have to fight against every day. And, some days it seems like it's too much, and it seems like it's going to be the thing that kills you. But you at least have to try. And that's, again, where like the asking for help component comes in, because you don't have to be alone. You don't have to be, feeling like you're the only one who's fighting in this battle. Like, you have other people behind you.
So before we move into the final segment, do you have any concluding thoughts? Anything we've left on the table? Anything you want to add to that piece about mental health?
I would probably just like to emphasize the importance of mental health for everybody. You don't have to feel depressed or anxious or have gone through a traumatic experience in your life to make mental health an important thing for you. Mental health it's a lifelong maintenance. It's something that needs to be attended to by everybody every day. And I think part of that is destigmatizing mental health in society and our expectations of what we look for and what we consider to be like normal people, and just understanding that I'm not sure that there is a normal, and each person has their own respective needs and their own respective experiences that shape who they are. And, asking for help is never a weak point. That's a very strong thing to have to do, to be that vulnerable to ask for help. So I would just implore the listeners and the viewers to explore their own mental health and their own needs and what it means for them to feel healthy.
Beautiful. I implore as well. I concur. So I think for the conclusion here, what I like to do is I normally will summarize sort of the conversation, maybe some of the main points and what I was able to gather from it, which this is a little bit easier because you and I talk about this stuff all the time. So I get to think about it all the time. And then we'll get to run through 10 fun questions, which you may or may not have already caught a glimpse of. So you may have prepared answers, which is a little unfair, but it also works. And then to conclude, I'll let you have the final word. You can shout out whatever you want to shout out. You can say whatever you want about yourself. And then we'll play the outro. So my concluding thoughts are, I was kind of piggybacking on what was just said, but every person is complex. I don't know if there's such thing as a simple person. I think people hurt and have joy and have trauma and have happy experiences. And so there are two different responsibilities you have. You have the responsibility as a learner. So you should understand what other people are experiencing and feeling and try to get a sense of that person before you pass judgment or you treat them a certain way. And then you have a responsibility to learn about yourself. Piggybacking off of what Katherine said is just understanding your own mental health, understanding your own sense of self, self-actuality, all of that good stuff. And just knowing what your limits are, your weaknesses, maybe what your individual struggles are, and the best way to heal those or address those. And in doing so, you learn a lot more about other people too, because people are probably feeling some of the same things and going through the same experiences. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's important it's so easy to say, and then it's so much more difficult to do, to not judge the people around you. You don't know the life experiences that they've had. You don't know what they experienced that day. It can be so easy, and I'm absolutely guilty of it, of just observing someone's behaviors and making really quick assumptions about them, that they're crazy or that, something must be wrong with them if they said that or feel that way. But just taking everything with a grain of salt and adding perspective to your world, and just try and come from a place of understanding and mutual respect.
Absolutely. You ready for these 10 questions?
I am.
So this is fun. I enjoy this because after all this heavy discussion, now we get to play a game and do a fun activity. So for people who are watching or listening that aren't aware, this is inspired by a show called Inside the Actor Studio from the 90s, hosted by James Lipton, rest in peace. And I have adapted his 10 questions because some of the questions are a little bit explicit, which I think we're beyond the point now of this episode being an explicit episode. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to go, grab those questions. I'm going to go with my questions. But I think they're fun. I think it's a good little tidbit, a little bit of insight into who you are. So first question, what is your favorite word?
Wanderlust.
Okay.
What?
You say it with such a Southern accent. You've become a true North Carolinian.
Wanderlust. Gotta get the nasally aspect back in there.
What is your least favorite word?
I refuse to say it, and I'm going to phrase it in the nicest way possible. Any slang term used for a reproductive organ. I hate it.
Fair.
Will not say it. I gag when other people say it.
It's a door for the imagination. What excites you?
Potential.
What upsets you?
Gotta really think about this one. There's a lot of things that upset me. Perceived failure.
What sound or noise do you love?
It's a very specific sound. The country, the woods at night, like the birds and the owls and the insects and the trees and the wind. It's a very specific sound, but I love it.
The crickets.
Sometimes.
What sound or noise do you hate?
People eating and drinking and sounds inside people's mouths. ASMR is disgusting.
As a husband, I've learned some skills related to eating properly or eating more safely, chewing better, things like that, where she doesn't have to hear the noises that I'm making. That's not always possible, but I'm learning. What motivates you to act every day when you wake up?
Spite.
we discussed this beforehand just to break the fourth wall, and this is what I was expecting.
I'll give a real answer. That's more of a sarcastic answer. What motivates me to act every day when I wake up would be, I think, again, potential. Like the day holds so much possibility in it that I have the ability to shape what my day is going to look like, and I have the ability to present new opportunities to myself.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would like to be a translator, something with languages. I really, really enjoy other languages. I dabbled in several, but I'm not fluent in anything but English. But I think it would be really, really interesting to be able to fluently and effectively communicate in multiple other languages.
What profession would you not like to do?
Anything where I have to sit in an office all day, whether it's like an accountant or, like you sell insurance, something. No, it's too boring.
What about IT?
No.
You could be one of those IT techs who travel out and fix stuff on the fly. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
So this one I've thought the most about just because I've listened to the podcasts, and other people, the other two guests on the show have given much more like thorough and thought out answers. It's just, I keep thinking of the same answer, so I might as well just say it. It's very simple. I would just like to hear God say, "Welcome home." And that's it. I don't need anything else.
I think that's fair. I think that says it all. Don't need anything elaborate, and that gives you that satisfaction and comfort without having to wait too long to get inside. There's no wrong answer, so those are very entertaining. So just because we're married, that doesn't mean I'm not going to thank you. So I appreciate you for being a guest on the podcast and exposing yourself to the wonderful web and the internet and everyone watching or / listening. Hopefully you will come on again and eventually become my co-host. That would be a wonderful experience. So aside from that, I'm going to give you the final word to do whatever you want, whether that's a shout out or something about yourself. Doesn't matter to me what you talk about. And then we will play the outro.
I do not want to shout myself out in any way, shape, or form. I know what I want to shout out. Be nice to nurses. Please.
Absolutely.
We're trying our best, okay? And I may not give you good news sometimes, but that's not my fault. Please be nice to me. Be nice to all nurses, okay? Family members, patients, please be nice. That's all I ask. Just be respectful.
Hey, if even one person catches it and follows through on it, it'll be worth it.
Be nice to your nurses.
Be nice to the nurses. All right, I'm going to hit the outro music, and then we are going to cut. We're all done.
Great.